This is a brief overview of the How to Interview booklet. You get to the booklet by going to capital.edu/career development, and then from that web page, click on the left-hand navigation bar, Career Booklets, and there are many in there. How to Interview is one of them. This booklet has many sections, and I am going to go through briefly and just say something quickly about each of those. As we go through, there are two sections that I'm going to spend a few more minutes on, or a few more seconds on. So this is the first main page of information, and what I'm going to suggest that you do, focusing on making an impression, remember that these two questions, when you get that phone call or email inviting you to an interview, are really important. I cannot tell you how important these are and how often students do not remember to ask these questions and then wish they had asked them later on. How much time should I plan for the interview? Read through this. Can you tell me who I will interview with? Ask them those two things, either through email, there's a suggestion down here, or on the phone if you're being asked, if you're being called with an invitation for the interview. The next section is about preparation before the interview. So there are lots of things that you can do to prepare when you know who the employer is and who you're going to be interviewing with. There's a section on the interview itself, the length of time, how that time is divided up. Here's where I'm going to pause again for just a second and focus on something for a few more seconds. The four essential elements before you begin your answers is really important to embed and memorize. So before you start answering a question, you need to listen carefully to the entire question. Don't start blurting out your answer until you are sure they are done asking the question. Maybe nod and maybe even paraphrase the question when they ask you. So for instance, they might say, tell me about your greatest strength and your greatest weakness, and you say, my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. Number two, why are they asking this question? If it's a technical question, it's obvious. It's related to the content of that. But what if they ask you about your leadership? Or what if they ask you about how you work on teams? That's maybe a little bit more obvious. What if they ask you what your favorite courses were at Capital, or what you would change about Capital if you could? Why are they asking those questions? Number three, what example will you use, or examples? Even if they don't ask you for examples, you should have an example to provide. So even if they ask you, what would you do in certain kinds of situations, and you say, in those kinds of situations, here's what I do, then after that you say, for example, last semester, and then you tell a story. So get that example in your mind before you start answering the question. And then finally, how will you end your response? Make sure that you don't trail off or say, so yeah, at the end of your answer. Make sure that your intonation goes down when you're answering, when you're finishing your answer. And make sure that you're making a point. Make sure that you're thinking ahead of time before you start answering your question, what is the point that I'm going to make? How am I going to end this response? There are a variety of question styles, structured, unstructured. One of the structured types is behavioral. Very rare is the stress type. There's windbag. There's traditional face-to-face, which right now is very rare unless we're wearing masks. Telephone, video, very common now. Lots of details about the video interviews that you can review there. A very common question, what questions should I have for them? There's a section on that. Illegal questions, salary questions, accepting and delaying offers. So there's a huge section on that. When you are getting an offer, read this before you are going to be getting an offer. Some thank you examples. Then there are some summaries of what you should be thinking about before the interview, at the interview, and you can see up at the top there, we've repeated the four essential elements to consider at that point, and follow up after the interview. And then 55 favorite employer questions. review these, and you don't have to, you shouldn't memorize your answers to these, but make sure you have examples for each of these. And when you have questions, reach out to Career Development, and we can prepare you for your interview, even with a mock interview.